The third cast on we're going to do in this post is called the belly button cast on. It's a type of provisional waste yarn cast on that employs I-cord to begin. Because we're doing I-cord and because it's waste yarn, we don't need to be concerned about the type of cast on we use. So I'm going to give the simple knitted cast on, and we'll do a little bit of I-cord to get us started. I mentioned in my earlier videos that I do a slip knot for most of the start of my knitting, and I do that in the same way as we started the loops for both the Emily Ocker and the invisible circular cast-ons. I start by holding the yarn tail down with my pinky finger. I wrap the yarn around my two first fingers and I cross it at the index finger. Then I take up my needle, I go under the first strand, over the second strand, and I draw up a loop. At this point, I can pull my work down and you can see that I have a slip knot that snugs up nicely to the top of the needle. So as I said, I'm just going to do a simple knitted cast on. When I'm doing a center out circle, if I'm doing a 6-stitch repeat, then I will start with 3 I-cord stitches. Because the other samples had an 8-stitch cast on, we're going to start with a 4-stitch I-cord. So I put 3 more stitches on my needle, and I knit the first row. Now, for those of you who haven't worked I-cord before, what you do is you slide your stitches to the opposite end of your double pointed needle. Give a little tug on the tail of your yarn. Bring it from the left to the right and knit the second row. And you repeat this until your I-cord is the length that you need. You don't need a great length for this. You just need enough to be able to organize your stitches and keep them secure while you're doing your work. So I've got a fairly short length of yarn, but I've got room to do another row of I-cord. Now, I can give this I-cord a little tug just to snug the stitches up at the back a little bit. And I'm ready to begin with my project yarn. So I can leave this tail of my waste yarn, introduce my project yarn, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to double the number of stitches from 4 to 8. To do that, we're going to knit into the front and back of each stitch. So I knit, bring my loop up, swing my needle tip around to the back, and then I knit again through the back leg of the stitch. Again, I knit in the front, swing my needle tip around, and knit in the back. Now, I could have split these 2 stitches off, or these 4 stitches off onto 2 different needles, but actually on an 8-stitch repeat, it helps stabilize the first row if you do 4 stitches on the first needle and then split the other stitches off onto 2 other needles. So we knit in the front, knit in the back, leave those stitches on that needle, knit in the front, and our tail from our I-cord has loosened off completely, so we can snug that back down. Push our needle tip back in there, and now we're going to knit through the back of the loop, and again we can draw that down. So now you can see that we've got a triangle formation. The start of the belly button can be on top of the work. The tail of both the waste yarn and the project yarn should be down below. I'm going to knit the first round so that you can see both how the first row joins up, and we also want to split these guys off onto 2 separate needles. We're going to be doing the pie shaping for this sample, So once I've knit this round, we'll be going quickly into other increases, and that will be coming up in tomorrow's video. So we knit these 2 stitches. Now we bring in the last needle and we knit those 2 stitches. So now we've got 4 needles. This one was the first needle, and now we're doing the second. And we're going to turn our work, and at this point we're going to make sure that our stitches are in the right order. When we do a knit through the front and back, the first stitch maintains the regular V that we have, and the knit through the back of the loop creates a little bar at the front of the work. So if this needle had been twisted, I would see the bar on the right and the stitch on the left. So when I see that, I know that my stitches are backward, so I just need to twist that needle back around so that the V is here and the bar is on the left. Once they're in the right order, I can knit them. And then I've got one more needle to do. And again, I'm just going to take a look, make sure I've got, yep, the V there and the bar there. And then I can knit those 2. Right now I'm going to break off. I'm going to do a piece of tomorrow's video showing the pie shaping to be consistent, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how to remove the waste yarn from your work so that you can finish off this cast on. So now we've got our work large enough that we can access the center and maneuver our stitches around, and we can start removing the waste yarn for our belly button cast on. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to thread our working yarn, our project color, into a tapestry needle. And the idea is to follow the green bumps in as much as possible. Because we did knit front and back in each one, some of them will go over as if it would look like a purl stitch on this side, and the other one is going to go under, so it's going to look like a purl stitch on the other side, which is the right side of the work. You can see we've got our waste yarn tail here, and that this does a bit of a loop-de-loop in this stitch. And again, this is because we did knit into one stitch and knit into the back of the same stitch. So as we do this, we want to be quite cautious that we don't catch the green yarn with the tip of the needle, and we go we start where we started with our working yarn, and it's looped around a green strand. So when we come back to this point, we'll just have to double check and make sure that we've got everything caught in here. So we're going to come up into that first stitch. We're going to take that first green bump, move it a little bit out of the way so that we can get the tip of our needle in through the yellow stitch without catching any of the plies of the green stitch. And then we're going to pull that loosely down. We're going to tuck that working color out of the way, and we're going to start getting rid of the green yarn. Once I've done that, and I'm sure that I haven't caught it on anything, I can pull that down, and you can see that the yellow now has formed a small bump there. So we're going to skip this next green bump, and we're going to come up into the next yellow stitch. And when I do that, once I've got my needle tip into that stitch and I know it's secure, I can move the green out of the way. So you can see that what's going to happen is now we have a bump that's going to form on the right side of the fabric. And again, I'm then going to turn my work now so that I can see, and I would do this even if it wasn't for the camera. I'm going to get that out of there, and I'm going to take my loop and I'm going to follow the green bump again. I'm going to loosen off the green in the hopes that I can get into the yellow stitch without catching either of the two green strands in that loop. And I haven't, but I've also missed a piece of the yellow. So there we go. I can see that it's clear. And I can pull, again, I'll pull it down loosely for now, pull the yellow out of the way, and get my green strands out of the way. And once I can get the green up above, I can start, you can see the stitches on the right starting to pull in. So again, I want to come into this stitch here, and this time I'm going to try and bypass the green strands just by going into the biggest gap I can find in the yellow ones. Oops, got around my needle tip. There we go. Ordinarily I would do this after the whole piece is cast off, but because I'm continuing on another tutorial, I've still got it on my double pointed needles. If the strand gets to be too long, remember it is waste yarn, and you can snip it off and just get the excess out of the way. And again, I want to come down through, and I've got this nice big gap up here. But before I do that, I'm going to get rid of some of this green that's still hanging around in the stitch that I'm working in. And I think I'm just going to pull the green to one side and try and get down into a space where I can catch the yellow without catching the green. I get a little particular about stuff like this. It's kind of a me thing, but basically as long as you've got the stitch secured and as long as you haven't caught the green strands, you should be in good shape. So this one had the bump on this side, so the next one is going to be on the other side of the work, and I'm just going to go up and pull and pull. Time to turn again. And we're going to go down in. And I've caught a bit of green strand there, so I need to make sure that's out of my way. And now you can see I've formed a bump on the right side, and I've got some excess green thread that needs to come out of there. There we go. And get it out of there. It feels like I've caught it on something. Yes, I have. There it is. So I can just give that a tug with my, you can see that little piece of green there is in the wrong place. So once I've got it released, okay, so I'm coming to the end, and I want to make sure I get, you can see that there's a tiny little stitch there, and I need that. I need that loop with my needle. So I'm going to open it up with a little pull, make sure that I've got it, and once I've secured this loop, I can pull the belly button out of the way, and I can just give a visual check, make sure that my yarn goes through every loop of that first round of 8 stitches, and I can pull it tight. There we go. Just make sure. I'm going to turn my work over, and you can see that I've got a cast on that looks a lot like the pinhole cast on, the invisible circular cast on, but I had better control over the stitches that were on the needle. All I have to do now is weave in my tail, and I will do that from the back of the work. When I'm doing a cast, or when I'm weaving in an end such as this, I tend to just go through the bars of the stitches for a couple of times. I'll even wrap back through one of the ends, and then when I'm happy with the center, make sure that I've got all those center legs of the stitches. At that point, I start branching out, and at this point I might split the yarn off into 2 pairs of plies with 1 or 2 plies in each, and what that does is it gives you a little more invisible join, but for the purpose of this sample I'll just show you how I weave in an end. I go unthreaded my needle. I basically just follow the path of the knitting. And I try to leave it just a little bit loose so that it is, you can see the bump more on the back. If you keep it loose, it'll puff up on the back, but you really won't see it the same from the front. And just to give you an idea, you can see the puffiness of this stitch, and I'll turn the work over and just keep your eye, and when I take the needle out, you can't tell the difference from the front. Once that end is woven in, the cast on is complete, and you can carry on with your project.